The night was thick with darkness, the kind that wrapped around the earth like a heavy cloak. A lone barn sat on the edge of a sprawling field, its worn wooden beams creaking softly in the wind. It was the kind of place where stories lived in the shadows, hidden whispers of the past swirling through the air like ghosts. But on this particular night, a different kind of presence stirred beneath the moonlight, one that sent a chill racing down the spine of old farmer Bill. He had raised his family in this very place, tilled these fields with calloused hands, and fought against the land's harshest storms. For Bill, the farm was more than just a piece of land. It was a sanctuary, a legacy he had built with blood, sweat, and tears. But now, as he tightened his worn work gloves, he felt something was deeply out of place. It started with strange noises at the edge of the property. At first, they were just soft rustles, the wind teasing the corn stalks, but soon they transformed into low growls in the night. The hair on the back of his neck prickled as shadows danced just beyond the tree line. Bill's instincts had always been sharp. They whispered to him to prepare. Something was prowling. The next day, as the sun's rays broke over the horizon, illuminating the fields, the tension hung thick in the air. Bill strolled across his land, feeling every inch of the earth beneath him. But peace was a stranger that morning. Dark paw prints trailed near the barn, closer than they should have been. He crouched down, tracing the marks with his fingertips. Coyotes, he muttered to himself, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. He had heard stories of these creatures becoming braver, emboldened by hunger and desperation. They were stirring, encroaching on his territory, drawn by the scent of livestock. Bill's heart raced at the thought. He had chickens to protect, and 2 young goats that hadn't yet learned how to fend for themselves. As the day wore on, the sun reached its zenith, casting an unforgiving light over the land. Bill gathered his tools, gripped tight, and took a deep breath. He couldn't just sit idly by. This was his domain, his family's legacy at stake. With a steely resolve, he checked the fences, making sure they were fortified against the creeping threat. Each snug knot he tied felt like a promise to his family, to his ancestors, and to the land itself. But as dusk approached, the air snapped with anticipation. A cruel chill swept across the fields, and with it came the haunting yips of coyotes. Bill's heart pounded like a drum, a primal rhythm echoing in the silence. He knew that he could no longer wait. He had to confront the danger head-on. That evening, under a tapestry of stars, Bill took a stand. Armed with a flashlight and his father's old hunting rifle, he made his way to the edge of the woods. He paused, heart thudding, and let the stillness envelop him. Out here, the world was alive and breathing, yet everything felt dangerously quiet, a prelude to the chaos that was about to unfold. Suddenly, a howl pierced the night, sending chills racing down his spine. Then shadows flitted between the trees, moving with a grace that gave them an eerie elegance. It was a pack hungry and desperate. They had come for the food, but they were about to find something else, a man unwilling to back down. With his breath echoing in his ears, Bill raised the flashlight, eyeing the pack as they emerged from the trees. Their eyes glowed with a fierce intelligence, a primal fire flickering within. He felt a swell of fear, intermingled with an exhilarating determination. They had crossed a line, and he was prepared to defend what was his. He shouted, voice booming against the stillness, startling even himself. The coyotes paused, uncertainty flickering across their faces. And for a moment it was just him against the pack, a human spirit standing tall against nature's wild forces. But nature has a way of reminding you of the balance it holds. One of the coyotes, larger than the rest, stepped forward, its gaze locked onto Bill's. It was a moment charged with electricity, a challenge of wills. If there had ever been a time to back down, it was now. Yet something within Bill refused to yield. This was not just about animals and food. It was about standing his ground, about fighting for what mattered. With a sudden movement, the pack stirred around him, their growls harmonizing into a chilling chorus. Bill whimpered internally but stood firm, bracing himself. The flashlight flickered as he swept it toward them, illuminating their hungry forms for just a heartbeat. In that blink, he saw not just animals but a reflection of his own struggle, a fight for survival in a world that never promised safety. The pack hesitated, sensing his unwavering resolve. With every heartbeat, the tension thickened. Bill witnessed fear spiral through the coyotes, but it quickly shifted to something deeper. They were all creatures of the same earth, driven by instinct, yet he refused to let them become the masters of his fate. Suddenly, his thoughts darted back to a story his father once told him, a tale about a lone wolf that defended its land against intruders. There was power in that story, a lesson of strength, bravery, and sacrifice. Bill took a step forward, rifle raised but aimed high. He didn't want to harm, just deter. "Leave my property," he called out, voice steady. "This is my home." In that moment, a stillness blanketed them. The coyotes exchanged glances, uncertainty marring their fierce facade. The pack began to back away, a hesitant retreat that felt both surreal and triumphant. But before they vanished back into the shadows from which they came, the largest coyote turned back, its eyes shimmering for just a moment in the fading light, as if recognizing a mutual respect. As the last of the pack disappeared into the dark woods, Bill felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with exhaustion wash over him. The confrontation had taken everything he had, but as he lowered his rifle and the flashlight dimmed, a sense of relief flooded in like dawn breaking through the night. He had held his ground against relentless predators, and he had protected his sanctuary. The days that followed were quieter, filled with the familiar rhythms of farm life, tending to crops, fixing fences, and caring for animals. But something had changed in Bill. He wasn't just the farmer. He was a guardian, a defender of his home. And at night, as he sat on his porch, sipping coffee and gazing into the fields, the whispers of his land resonated deeper than ever. He reflected on the encounter, each detail etched in the fabric of his memory. Prowlers might come and threats might loom, but he had found strength deep within, a conviction that shot through his veins like fire. Sometimes a battle isn't just physical, it's a test of spirit, a call to rise against what seeks to undermine your very existence. Weeks passed. Winter creeped into the air, and the world around him grew quiet, but the story of that night lived on. Tales of the brave farmer who took a stand circulated through town, reaching the ears of children and fellow farmers alike. They painted pictures of courage, a single man against a pack, a dance of fate framed by the wild. Yet Bill was aware that nature was ever watchful. New seasons would come, and the delicate balance would always swing. It was not just the coyotes he had to be wary of. The world held countless challenges, but he now approached each with a new lens, a resolve spun from the very web of existence itself. Every creature played its role, and every struggle shaped the land. And even in the quietest moments, he felt the pulse of connection with all living things around him, remnants of fear and threads of strength wound together like the roots of a sturdy tree. In the end, it wasn't just about the fight. It was about recognizing the battles within ourselves, ready to take a stand, fiercely and boldly. A full moon hung high in the night sky, casting an eerie silver light over the land. The air was still, laden with that strange, quiet tension that makes the world feel almost alive. In the dense shadows beyond the barn, movement flickered like the flame of a match about to go out. There, on the edge of the property, a threat brewed, hidden yet undeniable. Farmer Hank Williams stood on his porch, squinting into the darkness. He had built this family farm from the ground up. Every barn beam, every inch of tilled soil, told a story of sweat, struggle, and devotion. He had a connection to this land that ran deeper than roots, and now, with danger lurking close, something primal sparked within him. Just days earlier, he had noticed the first sign. A few chickens had gone missing during the night, their frantic clucking abruptly silenced as they crossed the threshold into the unknown. At first, he dismissed it as a fluke. Maybe a raccoon or some wandering dog had crept in. But as the days turned into sleepless nights, the quiet terror built into a storm of dread. He had counted heads in the henhouse, and they were fewer, much fewer. Then came the howling, a chorus of voices in the dark that sent tremors of fear into his heart. Coyotes, he suspected. Hungry, desperate, they had grown braver with the chilly nights, emboldened by a lack of food. As the moon rose high, illuminating crisp autumn leaves, the reality hit him like a slap to the face. The Prowlers had moved in, and they were not going to leave without a fight. Gripping the wooden rail of his porch, Hank could almost feel the pulse of the land beneath him. A farmer's job was more than growing crops and raising livestock. It was about protection and perseverance, a battle against nature's unpredictable forces. So he made up his mind. He would not back down. With a heavy sigh, he pulled on his old work boots, the leather worn and cracked just like him. The wind whispered as he stepped off the porch, carrying the scent of leaves and something more sinister. He turned off the porch light and grabbed his flashlight, its beam cutting through the night. Hank had faced storms that rattled the rafters and droughts that scorched the earth, but tonight was different. Tonight, the stakes were personal. As he approached the edge of the woods, the howling grew louder, a haunting serenade that twisted knots in his stomach. He moved slowly, cautiously, alert to every sound. A twig snapped underfoot and he froze, heart pounding. Each beat echoed with the thought, would he be enough to protect this place he loved? He reached the edge of the field where the tall grass swayed like waves in a nighttime sea. The sound of rustling sent his skin prickling, and he caught sight of glimmering eyes hiding in the dark, watching, waiting. There they were, silhouettes against the backdrop of shadowy trees. The pack moved with a silent grace, their forms sleek and hungry. They were a family much like his, driven by the same fierce instincts, the urge to survive. Hank could feel fear clawing at him, but something deeper pushed him forward. He raised his flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness and landing on the pack, illuminating their hungry faces. They hesitated for just a moment, and in that pause a standoff was born, a man standing firm against nature's relentless predators. The leader of the pack, with fur as dark as midnight, lifted its head high in challenge, eyes locked onto Hank's. For a split second, it caught a glimpse of the fear in Hank's heart, which only ignited its own hunger. But something shifted in Hank. He had fought too hard for too long to let fear dictate his fate. This land was his to safeguard. This was his home, built on the sweat of generations, each dirt-smudged memory rooted deeply in every inch of tilled soil. Strength surged through him, and he took a decisive step forward, raising the flashlight higher as if wielding it like a sword. His voice resonated through the trees, sharp and commanding. The pack flinched but remained close, eyes still narrowed, sizing him up. In the wild, dominance can shift in an instant, and Hank understood this instinctively. The largest coyote took a step forward, its snout hitching in the air, sniffing. Hank knew it had tasted the fear of many before him, and he wasn't about to become yet another casualty of nature's indifference. The flickering light painted stark shadows on their backs, highlighting the sharpness of their teeth and the hunger etched into their features. Each moment stretched like an eternity. The pack began to circle him, a confluence of muscles and primal instinct. In a flash, Hank remembered how his father stood resolute when a storm knocked down the barn once. He had gathered everyone, declared, "This land is ours." Hank took a breath, armed with that memory. "Leave." He called out again, but his voice quivered slightly, betraying the tight grip of anxiety coiling in his gut. He couldn't afford to show weakness, not now. Then, without warning, chaos erupted. The pack surged forward, a tempest of snarls and growls. Hank raised the flashlight high, a desperate measure to keep them at bay. The beam swung wildly, revealing sharp teeth glistening in the darkness. In that moment, his resolve solidified. He would either scare them off or defend his home with everything he had. But in the wild, every action has a consequence. The pack's instincts cut through the atmosphere of bravery, fueling a charge that shocked him. Hank stumbled back, his heart racing with the uncertainty of a man faced with life and death. Would he have to harm them? Could he bring himself to pull the trigger of his old rifle if it came to that? Suddenly, a high-pitched yelp broke through the din, cutting through the tension like a knife. It wasn't just instinct driving them. Could it be desperation? Fear crept in. The pack stopped just meters from him, their heavy breath visible in the cold night air, each puff a testament to their hunger. A moment hung heavy. Hank felt his own pulse calm slightly as he noticed one coyote, smaller and scruffier than the rest, battered and limping. Its ribs showed through its matted fur, a creature reduced to nothing but fight or flight. They weren't monsters. They were struggling beings just like him, and somewhere in that moment, understanding unfurled between them. Somewhere deep within, Hank remembered the stories of compassion his grandmother used to tell him about the wild. Life and death danced a fragile tango. Perhaps there was a way through this without violence. He dropped his voice to a gentle tone that surprised even him. The pack shifted, the alpha's gaze softening ever so slightly as Hank knelt down. He began to back away slowly, inching step by step away from the fields, the light of his flashlight still piercing the dark. He unhooked a small bag of grain he always kept for emergencies and scattered a few bits on the ground. "Here," he called softly, "there's enough for everyone." To his astonishment, the pack hesitated again, glancing from the food to him. That glimmering piece of trust began to speak louder than growls. One by one, they crept forward, cautiously sniffing at the grain he had laid out. Hank's heart raced, the tension still present but beginning to shift into something else, a tentative peace. One by one, they began to eat, the sound of gnawing filling the air where growls had just been. It felt surreal, this communion born of desperation, a shared understanding across two worlds colliding. There, in the valley of fear and instinct, Hank took a deep breath, letting hope and vulnerability wrap around him like a blanket. Night slipped by quietly, the pack munching away while the moon cast its light gently. For the first time, there was breathing room, a too-quiet suspension of the battle lines once drawn. Eventually, the alpha tilted its head, a silent thanks, before leading the pack back into the depths of the woods. They vanished into the shadowy embrace of trees, leaving Hank standing alone on the edge of the field, the weight of unexpected kinship settling into his bones. With a soldier's heart, a farmer's hands, and a mind buzzing with hope, Hank marveled at what had just happened. The Prowlers had moved in, yes, but they had also shared something profound, a mutual understanding woven through the struggles of survival. From that night on, the echoes of howls became distant reminders instead of terrifying threats. The birds returned, the crops flourished, and calm settled back over the farm, but now it was imbued with a deeper significance, an unyielding bond with nature, and the revelation that strength sometimes lies not in dominating but in understanding. Hank never forgot that moment. He knew there would always be Prowlers, whether they took on 4 legs or 2. But the heart of a farmer beat soundly, resilient against the wildness of the world. And perhaps in every standoff, there was the potential for something more, an opportunity to step out of fear and embrace the outrageous dance of survival for both man and beast. The wind howled through the tall grass, a chilling serenade for the night ahead. Out on the edge of the farm, Farmer Joe leaned against his weathered gate, staring into the dark expanse of the fields. Tonight, something felt different. It wasn't just the quiet, it was the weight of an unseen presence lurking in the shadows. Just last week, everything had seemed normal. Joe was up at dawn, tending to the chickens, checking on the cattle, and making sure everything was secure. But lately, whispers of trouble had drifted through the community. Prowlers' hungry coyotes had been spotted closer to farmlands, moving in under the veil of darkness. It was too close for comfort, and uncertainty danced in the back of his mind. He recalled his neighbor, old Mr. Thompson, who had once lost half his flock in a single night to a bold pack. The thought sent a shudder down his spine. Joe had built this place from the ground up, pouring years of hard work into every inch of soil. His family had farmed this land for generations, each plot of ground a testament to resilience. He had struggled against drought, storms, and now there's something wild and hungry that could take it all away in a heartbeat. In the stillness, the first rustle came, a soft, almost delicate sound. Joe straightened, senses heightened. His heart raced. The night was heavy with possibilities, a stage set for confrontation. He turned his flashlight on, the beam slicing through the darkness like a sword, probing for the source of the sound. It was then he saw them, a pair of glimmering eyes peering from beneath the brush at the edge of the woods. They blinked and vanished, but Joe knew what they were. The Prowlers had moved in, and they were not going to leave without a fight. Joe felt the fear gnawing at him, but he pushed it deep down. He had a job to do. He would not let them take what was his. He had a duty to protect the land and the family he cherished. With a determined nod, he made his way back to the barn, heart hammering in his chest. Once inside, he gathered supplies, a sturdy fence post, rope, and a flashlight bright enough to chase shadows. He would secure the perimeter and set traps if he had to. Every tool had its purpose, just like every farmer had to know how to defend their own. As he worked, the sun began to dip below the horizon, spreading shades of crimson and purple across the sky. The tranquil beauty of the sunset was starkly contrasted by the tension building within him. Shadows started to deepen, creeping along the fields. He peered out, catching glimpses of movement near the tree line. He was not alone, they were watching. Suddenly, a frantic clucking shattered the atmosphere, echoing through the barn. Joe's heart raced. The chickens. He leapt into action, rushing toward the henhouse. The sight that greeted him stole his breath. A coyote had breached the enclosure, gnashing its teeth at the frightened birds. Without hesitation, Joe sprinted toward the chaos, heart pounding with adrenaline. He shouted, brandishing the fence post like a shield. The coyote turned, eyes wide, instinctively backing away at the sight of a human. In that moment, they locked eyes and a strange understanding flickered. The primal instinct in Joe surged. He had to protect his flock. The coyote had its own desperate hunger, and while he could understand it, he couldn't let it win. He swung the post and struck the dirt near the creature's paws, sending it scurrying back into the dark. Breathless, Joe stood panting, surveying the chaos. The hens clucked and fluttered, vulnerable yet grateful for the narrow escape. But time was running out. He knew this wouldn't be the last encounter. As night closed in, he had to secure the barn, fortify it against the prowlers that lurked just outside. With every knot he tied and every board he reinforced, he could feel the weight of generations behind him. He thought of his father and grandfather, who had both stood their ground against storms and men alike. It was in his blood to fight, to protect, to stand firm against whatever threatened his way of life. But Joe's thoughts turned, too. What if this cycle continued? What if he had to sacrifice the lives of those hungry creatures to protect his own? He pondered a delicate balance, one that had played out in nature for centuries. Instinct clashed with empathy as he fortified the henhouse. As darkness enveloped the land, Joe stepped back, satisfied with his work. His flashlight flickered against the barn's wooden beams as he peered into the shadows. Silence reigned, but he knew it was the calm before the storm. The prowlers had been watching, waiting for the right moment. Then, just a few feet away, he heard it, a low growl, deep and throaty, emanating from the shadows. His heart dropped as four shapes materialized from the darkness, their eyes glowing like small embers. The pack had come, and they weren't just curious anymore. They were bold and desperate. In that moment, he felt alive, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He understood that this was it. This was the stand. Joe took a deep breath, steadying himself, the weight of the moment wrapping around him like a cloak. With the flashlight aimed at the leaders of the pack, he shined the light straight into their eyes. He shouted, voice unwavering. The beam flickered across their silhouettes, but it didn't seem to intimidate them. They were too hungry, driven by instinct and survival. The alpha stepped closer, a sharp snarl escaping its lips. For a heartbeat, everything paused. Joe drew himself up, standing as tall as he could amid the chaos. He could almost feel the pulse of the land echoing in his chest. This was more than just a physical confrontation. It was a clash of wills, a fight for existence. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, tension thickening in the still air. He could see the uncertainty swirling in their eyes, wavering between instinct and fear. Would they attack? Would he have to defend his home by any means necessary? Then the darkness shifted again, and Joe noticed something. Within the pack, a smaller coyote lingered, limping slightly, its coat matted and thin. It looked up at him, and in that moment he felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. A shared struggle coursed through the night. The pack was merely trying to survive, their desperation pushing them closer and closer. Could he in turn find a way to protect both his home and understand the wild relatives pushing forward? His heart thundered as he shouted, "I don't want to hurt you." The alpha cocked its head as if considering the words. The light flickered against shiny fur, the small coyote's breathing quick, shallow, a reflection of the fear within him. Joe's grip on the flashlight loosened slightly, his resolve wobbly yet sincere. "Please," he breathed. "I'll share with you." A heavy silence settled over the scene. The alpha growled softly, a sound vibrating through Joe's very core. But as the pack stood their ground, he took a careful step back, letting the grip on his flashlight ease. He wasn't here to only defend, he carried a deeper call. What if he could create a shared existence? They were two sides of the same coin, locked in a perpetual struggle for survival. That thought crystallized in his mind, igniting a flicker of hope. He could offer help, create a balance that could keep both his family and the coyotes safe. With a sigh, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small bag of grain he always carried for emergencies. He scattered it on the ground, taking another cautious step back. "Here," he said, voice firm yet gentle, "take this and go. I'll leave something for you whenever you come back, but just—" The larger coyote hesitated, its growl shifting to a curious whine. The others moved forward, drawn by the scent of food, the allure of survival taking precedence over aggression. Watching as the pack shifted, Joe saw the alpha take a step back, pulling its gaze away from him, if only for a moment, a decision forming in its mind. One by one, the coyotes edged closer, at first with hesitation, until the small one, a coyote with the weariness of hunger in its eyes, was the first to taste the grain, the sound of its gnawing filling the air. Joe's heart surged with a mixture of fear and relief. He felt the tensions ease, a shift in the air that whispered of shared understanding. It was an unspoken truce, a fragile bridge built in the shadows of shared struggle. With the chorus of the pack settled around him, the moments of fear began to unravel into something transcendent, something vital. Joe understood then that even in this wild existence, there was empathy. The instinct to survive was not a battle of beasts. It was a complex web connecting them all. As the coyotes devoured the grain, Joe stepped back, letting them take their fill. He allowed himself a breath of relief. He had faced them down, stood as a guardian of his land, but also found something surprising in that confrontation: a bond, an acknowledgement of existence across their differing worlds. As the last of the pack finished eating, they lingered just a moment longer. The alpha glanced back, a final look that felt almost like gratitude. Then, as silently as they had arrived, they vanished into the night, leaving behind only echoes of their shared encounter. Joe stood in the silence, heart still racing but filled with a new understanding. The Prowlers had not come as mere threats. They were a reminder that every creature, large or small, played its part in this grand tapestry of life. And sometimes taking a stand means more than defiance. It means finding a way to coexist. The stars sparkled overhead, the silence now a comforting blanket. Joe returned to the barn, his heart lighter yet worn by the struggle of the evening. As he looked over his flock, nestled safely within the henhouse, he felt changes brewing just below the surface. From then on, he would lay out scraps each night, offering peace where there had been tension. It was a small sacrifice for the safety of his farm, a strategy earned through the shared weight of two worlds. Prowlers may have moved in, but in the face of hardship, he had taken a stand not only as a farmer but as a steward of the land, forging a connection that would ripple through generations. In the dance of life and survival, Joe knew one thing for certain: protection could mean many things, and sometimes it meant welcoming the wilderness with open arms rather than fighting it. He had stepped gracefully into the wild, and perhaps, just perhaps, he had shown the Prowlers a way to stand together. A full moon hung low in the autumn sky, spilling its silver light across the quiet farmland. The rustling cornfields whispered secrets to the wind, but something felt different. Farmer Tom stood on his porch, eyes narrowed, watching shadows weave through the trees at the edge of his property. The air hummed with a sense of urgency. Prowlers had moved in, and tonight it felt like they were closer than ever. It all started a few days before. Tom had noticed the Signs chickens disappearing without a trace, an eerie stillness settling over the barnyard, the kind of quiet that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The goats were restless, bleating anxiously as they sensed the unseen menace lurking nearby. If there was one thing Tom learned from years of wrestling with the land, it was to trust his instincts. He had grown up on this farm, a patchwork of fields and woods where his family had worked the land for generations. Each inch was a testament to hard labor, blood, sweat, and unyielding love. The barn stood proud, a symbol of that legacy. It had weathered storms, droughts, and the test of time. But as he scanned the shadows, he felt an unsettling chill. This was a new fight, and Tom knew he had to prepare. Armed with a flashlight and his father's old hunting rifle, he ventured out. The shadows seemed to shift and dance, and the sounds of nocturnal creatures carried a heavy weight. The wind whispered through the trees, almost taunting him. Did that rustle come from the corn? Was it just the breeze, or was something watching him? He reached the perimeter of his property, where a patch of darkness pooled like an ink stain against the backdrop of the moonlit fields. A distant coyote howl echoed through the night, sending waves of unease coursing down his spine. He could picture the pack hungry, desperate, emboldened by the scent of livestock and the thrill of the hunt. Before the sun had set that evening, he had fortified the henhouse with fresh locks. The old wooden fence, rattled by storms, had been propped up with new posts. He thought he had done enough, but now doubt seeped in. Would it be enough? Just as he began to question himself, movement caught his attention. He directed the flashlight toward the trees, and there they were, eyes glinting in the dark. A pack of coyotes just beyond the edge of the field, silhouettes outlined against the foliage. They seemed to move as one, a fluid dance, steady and sure. It struck him how both predator and prey were tied in this relentless rhythm of life. But the coyotes were too close for comfort. His heart raced as two larger figures broke free from the group and stepped forward, leading the charge. Leaning against the fence, Tom stood his ground, legs rooted in the earth that had nourished him for years. He would not be swept away. He shouted, voice steady, though a tremor quaked beneath. The flashlight beam swept across the ground, illuminating their faces momentarily, a brief glimpse into their wild eyes. They paused, sizing him up, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. But this wasn't the time for fear. Tom had fought so many battles in his life against droughts, floods, and even the weight of loss, but this felt different. The stakes controlled him. It was his livelihood on the line. He took a deep breath, reinforcing his commitment to protect his farm. The coyotes didn't budge. They seemed to relish the standoff, drawn by their instincts and a hunger that twisted tight in their stomachs. Tom's mind raced. Could he bear to chase them away, to fight them off? They were merely searching for food, driven by their primal instincts. He had a choice to make. He could fight or find a way to coexist. Suddenly, a small blur darted from behind the pack of young coyote, its ribs protruding through its scraggly coat, limping as it tried to keep up. Tom's heart sank. He could see vulnerability, the desperation to survive mirrored in its wide eyes. Instinctively, Tom lowered his rifle slightly. The fear he felt began to morph into empathy. The alpha coyote turned its gaze toward the younger one, a protective instinct flickering in its depths. A bond formed, grounded in survival. Tom pondered this connection as his heart ached. The world was complex. Struggling for survival was a thread that wove through all living beings. "Listen," Tom said, his voice softer now. "I understand hunger, but this is my home." The coyotes accepted his words with mixed expressions. Curiosity danced across their features, but the primal call to hunt echoed louder. Before he knew it, desperation surged like a tidal wave. "There must be another way," he muttered, glancing back toward the barn as an idea sparked in his mind. Tom rushed inside, heart racing, driven by a desire to find a solution. What if he could share a fraction of what he had? He rummaged through bags until finally his hands found stale bread and leftover scraps that had accumulated. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Tom scooped the food into a bowl and headed back out. The coyotes were still there, poised and alert. "This can help," he declared, dropping the bowl at a distance, careful to keep the space between them. The moment-stretched confusion rippled through the pack. Would they accept his offering? The alpha eyed him warily but ventured closer, the hunger evident in its gait. The others followed suit, circling the bowl cautiously. It was a strange dance of trust and wariness. As they eased toward the food, Tom felt the weight of hope settle over him like the night sky full of stars. The young coyote approached last, hesitating as if caught between danger and the sustenance it craved. Tom held his breath, waiting, praying that this would be enough to quench its hunger. Finally, it took a step forward, testing the ground before sniffing the edges of the food. The moment felt like magic. A secret bridge was forging between worlds that seemed irrevocably separated. The alpha, satisfied with its surroundings, joined in, and the pack shared the meal. Each bite felt like a communion, delicate and profound. As they fed, Tom felt a swell of relief wash over him. The tension eased, replaced by a fragile peace that lit up the darkness. Maybe the Prowlers could coexist with the farmer after all. The boundaries could blur, softened by understanding and shared need for survival. As the last pieces of bread disappeared into hungry mouths, the Alpha lifted its head, a silent acknowledgement of the truce. Tom sensed the shift. Something raw and powerful stirred in that moment. The moon shone down, illuminating their instinctive dance of empathy and connection, intertwining their lives for the briefest of moments. And just like that, the pack began to retreat, slinking back into the shadows from which they came, the young one lingering a moment longer before disappearing into the brush. Tom stood, heart still racing but filled with an unexpected warmth. He had faced them down, not with aggression but with compassion. In that encounter, he had forged a connection more potent than fear, a deep understanding shared across two worlds. The nights continued, but they were no longer shrouded in dread. Instead, he found peace in the ritual of sharing food with the coyotes. He laid out scraps each evening, watching as they came closer, the trust between them growing stronger. He could hear their howls now, not a threat, but a call that resonated in harmony with his own heart. As the brisk winds of fall turned to the chill of winter, Tom kept his farm thriving, knowing he was not alone. The Prowlers had moved in, yes, but they had also brought something invaluable, a sense of balance, a reminder that all beings share the same journey of survival. In the complex weave of nature, Tom found his role not just as a farmer but as a bridge, an understanding that sometimes taking a stand means embracing both the struggles and triumphs of those around us. He had learned that true protection can emerge from vulnerability, that the heart has the power to shift boundaries, and as he watched the pack slip back into the night, he smiled. They were not enemies, they were allies in the wild dance of life, struggling together beneath the same moonlit sky. Prowlers had moved in, but the farmer had taken a stand not in battle, but in understanding, changing the course of their shared fate forever. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and red. But for Farmer Joe, the beauty of the sunset was overshadowed by an unsettling feeling gnawing at his gut. Just days ago, he'd heard the first echoes of trouble-faint howls carried on the wind, sharp and haunting like a string pulled tight. Prowlers had moved in, and he could sense it in every fiber of his being. Joe had spent his life on this land, a tapestry woven with hard work and determination. Each corner of the farm held memories, his father teaching him how to plant seeds, the laughter of children chasing after the chickens, and the warmth of summer evenings spent on the porch. He had nurtured the fields with love, watching the crops rise and flourish under his care. But now shadows were creeping in, threatening to unravel all he'd built. That morning, during his routine check on the henhouse, he noticed something alarming. The frantic clucking of his hens was filled with something else, a palpable fear. It was the kind of fear that sent shivers down his spine. A few chickens were missing, their absence like a dark whisper hanging in the air. But he had been too late. As the sun slipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the farm, Joe tightened the grip on his flashlight and surveyed the edges of his property. He didn't have much time. Dusk was settling in, and the Prowlers would soon come out to hunt. The more it weighed on him, the more he felt the weight of generations on his back. He had a duty to protect this land, to stand firm against the threats lurking in the dark. With the flashlight trained on the tree line, he scanned the woods like a hawk. The rustle of leaves sounded like whispers taunting him. He remembered stories from other farmers how packs of coyotes had moved closer, their hunger driving them deeper into farmland. Those stories always ended the same way, heartache. But tonight, he wasn't going to let that happen to him. As twilight draped its veil over the fields, a chill swept through the air. Then, just like that, a pair of bright eyes blinked from the darkness, and then another. Hearts racing, Joe's breath caught in his throat. He felt as though he were facing an invisible army. The pack moved like silk through the shadows, fluid and stealthy. Each paw placed carefully, darting cautiously, waiting, plotting their assault. He shouted, voice steady, though doubt rattled in the back of his mind. His heart pounded like a war drum, a battle hymn reverberating deep within him. The light from his flashlight swept across the ground, illuminating the faint outlines of three coyotes positioned in a formation sharp, hungry, instinctually aware of their power. But Joe stood firm. He raised his flashlight higher, aiming it at the leading coyote, its jaw clenched and fierce. It seemed to sense his courage, but it couldn't be swayed so easily. They knew what they wanted, his chickens, his livelihood. He took a step forward, feeling the years of toil, sweat, and determination rise up within him. "Not tonight," he declared, voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The coyotes hesitated, their noses twitching, scenting the resolve radiating off him. It was a moment layered with uncertainty, and yet there was a strange connection, a clash of instincts, a standoff at the edge of two worlds colliding. As he stood there, challenging them with nothing but a flashlight and a fierce heart, memories flooded his mind. Stories his grandfather had told him about standing tall against storms, about how nature had an uncanny way of testing resolve. The coyotes were here to survive, but so was he. In that split second, he realized there was more than just fear at play. There was vulnerability, a shared instinct sharpened by survival. He understood then that he could fight, but what were the costs? What would it take to protect his land while still honoring the wild creatures seeking food for their families? He felt torn between instinct and empathy. The moment stretched like a taut wire, the air thick with charged energy. Then in a heartbeat, the largest coyote lunged forward, teeth bared in a snarl, and Joe's defenses kicked in. He swung the flashlight toward the ground, a desperate measure to create distance to ward off the approaching danger. The beam flickered wildly, but then amid the chaos, a vision unfolded in Joe's mind, a choice beyond aggression and fear. He blurted out and something shifted. The coyote stopped, its muscles coiling, unsure. Joe's heart raced, not just with fear, but with an unexpected flicker of hope. The young coyote lingering beside the alpha caught his eye, and Joe's breath hitched. It was a mere pup, searching for food, lost and alone. The urgency of the moment pressed down heavy on him. For a fleeting instant, he dropped his flashlight and stepped back, exposing his heart. He shouted, raw sincerity pouring from his voice. "You're hungry." Time slowed, and in the pause, he had a revelation. This fight didn't have to end in destruction. Maybe there was a way to coexist, to bridge the gap between predator and protector. From the depths of his memory, a warmth spread through him. His grandmother's stories of compassion in the wild, tales of understanding and balance. With a shaky hand, he rummaged through his pockets, pulling out a few slices of stale bread he had meant to toss earlier. He dropped it on the ground, trembling with uncertainty and hope. "Take this. Just leave my henhouse alone," he urged, stepping back slowly, giving them space to decide. As he knelt, he felt exposed, stripped of the armor he had built in the face of conflict. The alpha coyote flickered its gaze between him and the bread, tension diffusing like morning mist. The other coyotes edged forward alert, yet drawn by the prospect of food. The young one hung back, eyes wide, unsure and wary. They sniffed the air, hesitating as if weighing the risks. The pulse of their hunger seemed to overpower the instinct to flee. And then, slowly, the leader took a hesitant step forward, inching closer to the offering. Joe held his breath, heart pounding in anticipation. Would they accept the offering? Would trust start to weave its fragile strands between them? Finally, the alpha coyote lowered its snout, cautiously approaching the bread, and then, with an eager twist of its mouth, devoured a piece. The other coyotes followed suit, their caution falling away as hunger took over. Joe felt the tension in his muscles relax, the weight of impending doom giving way to something unexpected, a shared bond, a thread of understanding weaving through the air. The small coyote drew closer, finally stepping out from the shadows. Joe watched, heart swelling with both fear and compassion. Its frail body quaked, but it approached the trail of crumbs, taking a bite. In that electric moment, a fragile truce unfolded. As they feasted, time seemed to stretch into eternity. Joe marveled at this wild exchange, understanding blossoming in his chest. He caught glimpses of their beauty, how they moved in harmony, how survival danced intricately among them. It was a reminder that every creature, whether predator or prey, was bound by instinct, by the will to live. For the first time, a startling reality sunk in. The coyotes represented a side of nature that people rarely acknowledged, a side driven by hunger, desperation, and the need to survive. It hit him like a wave crashing against the shore. They weren't his enemies, they were survivors just like him. Gradually, the pack stepped back, taking their final bites, and the young one looked up at Joe with those wide, innocent eyes. It was a plea, a question without words. Joe's heart squeezed tight in his chest. This connection would endure beyond this night, resonating with the rhythms of life. He had shown kindness where others might have struck back, and in that choice he had become something greater, not just a farmer but a guardian of the land. As the coyote slipped back into the depths of the night, the taste of freedom lingered in the air. Joe stood in the silence that followed, a newfound sense of purpose settling over him. He had protected what mattered to him, not just his land, but the essence of survival that tied them all together. Each night that followed bore witness to this burgeoning relationship. Joe set out scraps regularly, leaving food at the edge of the field, and slowly the coyotes returned each evening, their once predatory stares softening into a cautious trust. They became part of the landscape, shadows weaving around the edges of his life, a silent acknowledgement of their connection. Through winter's chill, as snow dusted the roofs of the barns, a rhythm blossomed. Joe learned to anticipate their visits, standing at the porch with a feeling of camaraderie rather than fear. The Prowlers had come to share the land, and he began to embrace this complex harmony. But it wasn't without challenges. Prowlers were still prowlers. Predators were born with instincts honed for survival. Each morning, he found evidence of skirmishes, tufts of fur caught on fence posts, ominous signs that danger still lingered nearby. There were moments of conflict, but now they were infused with understanding. He refused to close himself off, recognizing that survival was a shared burden. Together they learned. He tended to his farm while the coyotes learned to navigate the boundaries of his world. He became savvy, ensuring his livestock were safe, building fences and reinforcing the henhouse. The struggle between man and nature transformed into a cooperative dance instead of a battle. And every evening when he left offerings at the edge of the field, he could hear howls echoing through the night, like songs of gratitude mingling with the stars. Joe found himself smiling at the sky, gratitude pouring out. In the months that turned from icy frost to the kiss of warm spring, life surged anew. The dawn of new beginnings painted the landscape with tender green buds sprouting through thawed earth. Flowers bloomed, and with them the world turned vibrant, a reminder that even amid uncertainty, life found a way. That spring marked the return of the young coyotes, now nearly full-grown, majestic and sleek. They roamed the earth with newfound grace, and Joe could see the confidence in their movements. The bond they shared came to life palpably, a connection that crossed boundaries, reinforcing the idea that nature had a language all its own, an understanding crafted through respect and survival. But the day finally came when life took an unexpected turn. That fateful evening, while sitting on the porch and watching the sun dip low, shadows gathered near the field. Tension filled the air. As twilight descended, Joe's heart sank. The familiars were back, flickering at the edge of the woods, but tonight felt different. The unmistakable growl of another pack echoed, more menacing and dangerous. His instincts flared a warning prickling beneath his skin. This could escalate quickly. Joe grabbed his flashlight but paused. What if there was another way? He recalled the bond he had forged with the original pack, the delicate balance between hunter and caretaker. He shouted, voice carrying across the twilight, but the thudding of paws echoed louder than his words. The new pack surged out of the woods, fierce and hungry. His heart raced as they charged toward the territory he had protected, feasting on the fear that loomed thick in the air. Then, as the chaos unfolded, he saw the familiar shapes of the coyotes he had come to understand. They emerged, standing shoulder to shoulder. Could they truly be allies? This was a moment to face not just the danger, but the fear coiling within him. The older coyotes took a protective stance between Joe and the new threat, instincts ignited, asserting their claim. He shouted, but it was too late. The new pack snarled, a chaotic chorus echoing through the field. He felt the tension thick and intense, a battle line drawn between loyalty and survival. But then, astonishingly, in the midst of chaos emerged an unexpected calm. Cautiously, Joe raised his flashlight, illuminating the leader of the original pack. The alpha stared into his soul, a question ringing out through the air. Would he trust them, allow them to protect each other? In that heartbeat, the world felt alive, pulsing with agency. He saw it in their eyes, a fierce determination, a willingness to hold their ground. Joe shouted, rallying courage as though their shared survival depended on it. The standoff lingered, a beautiful dance of instinct and understanding. In this pivotal moment, everything was laid bare. Not just predator and prey, but a reminder that they were all part of the same intricate tapestry of life, each role woven with meaning. As the rival pack moved closer, the original coyotes pushed back, unfurling like shadows almost in defiance. They weren't just defending territory, they were declaring a bond, echoing the sentiments of ancestors who had stood before them. With a surge of adrenaline, both packs confronted each other, echoing the primal instinct to survive. But instead of violence, something extraordinary happened. The scent of fear and dominance hung in the air, but at that moment it transformed. Joe felt the balance shift, a web of connection rising through the air. The new pack hesitated, sensing the intricate bond that had formed, even amid chaos. They sensed it an emerging alliance, and the tension began to fracture. Then, like a slip of water through fingers, the rival pack sensed the deeper understanding. With one last snarl, they turned away, retreating back into the shadows, leaving the original coyotes guarding Joe protectively. The moment hung heavy in the air, silence settling like a blanket over the fields. Joe's heart was racing, elation rushing through him. They had not only taken a stand, they had woven a new connection that transcended primal instincts, a moment of triumph for man and beast alike. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Joe knew deep in his bones that this wasn't just about survival. It was a lesson, a reminder that strength didn't come from dominance but instead from understanding. They had forged a bond across boundaries, a dance of coexistence that would guide their shared destiny. The Prowlers had moved in, but Farmer Joe had taken a stand not just as a protector, but as a force woven into the very fabric of nature. And as the stars emerged in the twilight sky, he knew they were not just opponents, but a family, united under the vast expanse of the wild. The air was thick with tension as the full moon cast a silver glow over the empty fields. In the distance, a faint rustle broke the stillness of the night. Farmer Sam stood on his porch, scanning the dark horizon with unease. The world around him, usually peaceful, felt alive in a different way. Something was out there. Earlier that day, he had seen the telltale signs, tracks in the soft earth, feathers scattered like unspoken farewells. His chickens. One by one, they had been disappearing, and the gnawing fear in his gut had told him they were not taken by just any predator. The whispers of other farmers echoed in his mind, stories of hungry coyotes creeping into the night, prowlers with sharp teeth and empty bellies. As twilight deepened into night, Sam felt the weight of his family's legacy on his shoulders. For generations, this land had been their home. He remembered his father's hands, calloused and strong, teaching him to till the earth, to plant seeds, and to stand watch over their flock. They had weathered storms and droughts together, but this felt different. This felt personal. With a deep breath, he grabbed his flashlight and stepped down from the porch, the boards creaking beneath him. Each step toward the barn felt heavier than the last, not just with the weight of his boots, but with the weight of responsibility. If it wasn't only his chickens at risk, but also the very heart of the life he'd built, he knew he had to act. Gathering an old shovel, a sturdy bucket, and a few sharpened fence posts, Sam prepared for the long night ahead. As he moved, the wind whispered through the trees, amplifying the sense of dread that clung to him like a second skin. He paused just outside the henhouse door, listening. Silence engulfed him, pressing in from all sides. Suddenly, a heart-stopping howl punctured the quiet. The sound sent chills racing down his spine. It was close, much closer than he had expected. Sam's fingers tightened around the flashlight, the beam flickering against the wall of darkness as he stepped inside the henhouse. His heart hammered wildly in his chest. Inside, the hens crowded together, their eyes wide and frantic. The air was thick with their anxiety, and Sam felt his own fears amplify. He glanced at the makeshift lock he had installed only days before. Trusting it had seemed naive now, Moments passed like hours, and just as Sam was about to exit, a soft scratching noise pulled his attention to the back door. Prying it open, he shone his flashlight outside. The beam struck two glowing eyes peering back at him from the edge of the yard. He commanded, though his voice trembled. The eyes blinked slowly, evaluating him. Then, without warning, a sleek gray form emerged, a coyote, low and hungry, followed by a few more. They moved cautiously, each paw placed with deliberate care. Sam's heart raced. They were after his flock, driven by instinct and desperation. But he was not about to let them have it. With resolute determination, he stepped back outside, positioning himself between the hungry predators and his precious hens. As the first coyote crept forward, Sam brandished the flashlight like a weapon. He shouted. The coyote halted, surprise seeping into its movements, but did not retreat. Instead, it tilted its head, the calculation evident in its eyes. What did it see? A farmer ready to fight, or a desperate man standing against nature's will? Sam was surprised to find a flicker of empathy washing over him. He knew this was a battle for survival on both sides. They were simply creatures driven by their need to feed their families, just like him. But as if reading his thoughts, the pack advanced, their growls cutting through the night air like jagged glass. A new anger ignited in Sam. He wasn't just defending his flock. He was defending the life he had built, the generations that came before him, and the dreams he carried for those who would come after. As the lead coyote lunged, teeth bared, Sam brought the flashlight down with all his might, crashing it against the ground. The glow flared brightly, startling the pack. For a moment their growls faltered, uncertainty creeping into their calculus. Sam bellowed, holding his ground. "You want to eat." But he knew that words alone wouldn't suffice. They had known hunger too long, he could feel it in his bones. The standoff turned into a standoff of wills. Sam understood that their instincts conflicted with his own protective urges. In that racing heartbeat, as tension crackled between them, it dawned on him. Their struggle was a reflection of his own. He was willing to fight for his life, just as they were willing to hunt for theirs. As if sensing his resolve, the pack began to circle him, and with each movement, the weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. But what was he truly fighting for? Would he hurt these desperate creatures, or could he find a different solution? A rush of daring surged through him. "If you're hungry, I can help you," he spoke softer this time, letting his empathy soak into the words. The coyotes halted, their eyes flickering with curiosity and skepticism. He ran to the barn, heart pounding as he recalled the scraps he had stored away. Reaching for a bag of stale bread and leftover grains, he hurried back outside. The coyotes watched, their wariness mixed with intrigue as he tossed the food to the ground nearby. "Here, this will help," he called out. The alpha coyote stepped forward cautiously, sniffing the air. The pack, hungry and hesitant, seemed uncertain about this unexpected offer. Slowly, the leader approached the food, the light catching its features, a once fierce predator now softened by the prospect of nourishment. This was a chance, an opportunity to forge common ground rather than bloodshed. Sam watched as the first nibbles were taken, feelings of hope revitalizing the air. The young coyote, still trembling with uncertainty, lingered behind, its wide eyes portraying both hunger and fear. Sam knelt down, locking eyes with the young one. He whispered, and somehow in that moment, he felt their connection deepen. The alpha coyote glanced back at the pack, as if to assess their leader's actions, and sensing an unusual shift, took a step back. In that rare flicker of trust, Sam realized he was witnessing something beautiful, a moment of understanding existing between predator and prey. The pack consumed the scraps hungrily, and as they devoured the pieces, the giant weight of dread began to lift. They filled their bellies on the offered food, their bodies relaxing as hunger finally soothed its grip. Sam could feel something shifting. The air around them was no longer charged with aggression, but a tentative alliance. As the last scraps disappeared, the coyote stepped back, their fierce demeanor softening. The alpha approached him cautiously, eyes fixed on Sam's face, lifting its head slightly. There was a shared moment of recognition. No longer just a farmer and a pack of prowlers now, they were part of something larger. Days turned into a week, and every night the pack returned. Sam found himself adjusting his evening routine, setting out food with a sense of purpose rather than fear. The dance of existence shifted, and with each fleeting encounter, the boundaries between them blurred like the edge of the horizon. Instead of tension, there were moments of companionship. The young coyote grew bolder, exploring the yard while the alpha watched protectively from a distance. The chickens, albeit still wary, seemed to sense a new presence as well, shifting through the coop in a semblance of calm. Sam laughed to himself one evening as he watched the young coyote chase after a fluttering leaf, an innocent mirage of playfulness in the shadows of uncertainty. They were no longer just prowlers, they were equals in the wild, bound by the same dance of life and survival. Every night he grew more confident, realizing that sometimes taking a stand means showing kindness, even when fear loomed large. But soon enough, the seasons began to change. The vibrant green of spring faded into the warm hues of summer. Sam was busy tending to the crops, ensuring his farm flourished, yet he couldn't escape the weight of unpredictability. The risk of losing what mattered most was always present. And then, one hot evening, everything shifted again. As dusk settled like a fog, a new sound began to stir in the distance, low growls and unnatural howls. This time it was different. Sam could feel the tension return, the air thick with foreboding. Another pack was on the move, more ferocious, more desperate. He stepped outside, heart racing at the sight of a larger group of coyotes encroaching on his property. The growls echoed through the stillness like a warning bell. This was not the same pack they had dealt with before. These prowlers were bold and aggressive, and they had no hesitation. It was a standoff, but this time Sam felt a different kind of fear. The coyotes he had nurtured before stood with him, instinctively stepping forward protectively. There, in the midst of uncertainty, he saw the alpha of his original pack, poised like a guardian. He called out, feeling adrenaline coursing through his veins. This wasn't just about protecting his flock anymore. This was about survival, his, and the creatures he had learned to respect. The opposing pack moved closer, growling and snapping, ready to challenge the defenses of the territory that had become a fragile sanctuary. Sam felt the lines drawn between predator and prey, but now he stood firmly with the creatures who had become part of his world. The moment stretched, tension clawing into the air. Sam's flashlights flickered, illuminating the dynamic of wills and instincts. The two packs circled one another, hostility ripe in their growls. He could feel the fear in his gut. This wasn't just about the chickens anymore. It was about belonging and standing strong. As the standoff escalated, the alpha of Sam's original pack took a step forward, meeting the leader of the rival pack with fierce determination. Sam could sense it. There was something primal in their exchange of promise to protect the territory they had forged together. He shouted, his voice echoing against the night sky. The growls reverberated through the air like thunder rolling in from a distance. The battle lines had been drawn and unexpected allies formed in the shadows. A sudden surge of hope rose inside him, a belief that they could resist aggression through unity. Moments passed, tension tightening further until the rival pack seemed to falter. The leader paused, as if recognizing the strength that had forged between Sam and his coyotes. With one last defiant snarl, the rival pack retreated into the night, shadows slipping back into the darkness. Relief washed over Sam as he released a breath he hadn't even realized he had been holding. The original pack stood beside him, alert and fierce, but the bond they had formed now ran deeper than ever. In the days that followed, they continued to thrive, navigating the balance between predator and prey. Sam found unexpected friendships blooming, a sense of harmony that deepened with each encounter over time. The world around them shimmered anew, painted in shades of understanding and compassion. As summer melted into autumn, they faced threats, triumphs, losses, and love. Farmer Sam had taken a stand not just for his chickens, but for the delicate web of life threaded through his land. He realized that strength lay not in force, but in forging connections across that intricate tapestry of existence. The Prowlers had moved in, yes, but in doing so, they had brought with them a lesson far more profound than he could have ever anticipated. He emerged not merely as a farmer, but as a guardian, a steward of the land, a custodian of coexistence. In the seasons ahead, he knew that the journey would continue, bound by the understanding that true strength meant growing together. Together, They danced intricately across the fields, defying the darkness with the light of compassion. A chilling howl echoed through the still night, slicing through the calm like a knife. Farmer Jake stood on his porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath him as he gripped the railing tightly. Shadows danced in the moonlight, casting eerie shapes across the yard, but his eyes were fixed on the tree line where a pair of glinting eyes watched him intently. Prowlers had moved in. He felt it in his bones. The sense of danger was palpable, as if the night itself held its breath. Just days earlier, life on the farm had hummed with rhythm and routine. The sun rose over the fields, bathing them in golden light. Jake had spent the morning tending to his animals, his heart swelling with pride at the sight of his healthy crops. But then the whispers started hushed conversations among neighbors about a growing coyote pack that was becoming bolder in their search for food. It sent shivers through him. Now, as the world around him darkened, that fear crystallized into something sharper, a realization that it was no longer just a distant threat. It was here. Earlier that day, Jake had found Sign's feathers scattered near the henhouse, the telltale tracks pressed into the soft earth. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. This land was not just a job. It was a legacy, a piece of his family's history that stretched back generations. He remembered his father's worn hands guiding him through the seasons. They had weathered storms together, celebrated harvests, and held each other through losses. He couldn't let it all slip away. The howl rang out again, closer this time, a spine-chilling reminder of what he faced. With a firm grip on his flashlight and his father's old rifle slung over his shoulder, he stepped off the porch, determination igniting within him. Porch light flickered, illuminating dark corners of the yard filled with unseen dangers. What if tonight was the night? What if he didn't act fast enough? The questions clawed at his mind as he made his way toward the barn, each step echoing in the silence that enveloped the night. He could hear the restless clucking of the hens inside, their frantic movements mirroring his own rising anxiety. Inside the barn, the smell of hay and earth grounded him momentarily. The hens were huddled together, eyes bright with fear. He glanced at the locks on the henhouse door, checking for the third time. Everything had to be secure. He tightened the padlock and turned back to face the darkness outside. The prowlers were restless, and he could feel their hunger clawing at the edges of the evening. Standing at the barn door, he peered into the night, the flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. Suddenly, he saw movement, a blur darting through the corn stalks. Panic surged within him. He shouted, trying to mask his fear with bravado. But as the shadows slinked closer, he could feel the primal tension curling in the air. Out of the darkness emerged a coyote, sleek and hungry, followed by the rest of the pack. They moved with an ease born from necessity, confidence radiating from their bodies. This was no random scavenging, they had come with purpose. Jake's heart raced as he took a step forward, the rifle feeling heavy against his shoulder. He commanded, trying to keep his voice steady. The pack hesitated, the lead coyote tilting its head as if sizing him up. In that moment, everything hung in the balance: his life, his farm, and the instinctual dance that played out between man and beast. They were hungry, and he was terrified. But deep down, he wondered how far he was willing to go to protect what was his. One coyote sniffed the air, muscles coiling, and Jake could see the intensity in its eyes. This wasn't just a battle over territory, it was a life-or-death struggle. He steadied his breath but felt a part of him resist the urge to pull the trigger. These were wild animals, driven by instinct just like he was. But the moment was brief. The pack darted forward, growling, and panic surged through him. He swung the flashlight toward them, the beam cutting through the darkness, flickering across their glistening fur. He shouted again, this time with more urgency. But the lead coyote lunged, snapping its jaws in a desperate bid for food. Jake's instincts kicked in. In one swift motion, he raised the rifle, his finger hovering over the trigger. The tension taut like a wire stretched to its limit, threatening to snap. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of something unexpected. A smaller coyote lingered at the back of the pack, its ribs visible beneath its thinning coat. It seemed hesitant, uncertain, just a pup trying to survive. In that fleeting moment, his heart melted a little. The word escaped Jake's lips almost instinctively, and he lowered the rifle. The whole dynamic shifted. He didn't want to hurt them. Maybe he could find another way to protect his animals without bloodshed. The alpha coyote paused, its growls quieting as it turned to observe Jake. A silence fell over the standoff, just the sound of the wind rustling the leaves and the steady thump of Jake's heart echoing in the hushed night. He took a breath, hoping that something could change. "Look," he said, his voice softer. "I know you're hungry." The pack hesitated, shifting their weight, uncertain of this man who both threatened and offered. Jake stepped back, moving slowly toward the barn. He reached for a bucket of leftover grain he had set aside for emergencies, heart pounding with an unexpected mix of fear and hope. As he placed the bucket at the edge of the yard, he turned back, feeling exposed yet brave. The alpha coyote glanced at the others, a flicker of understanding flashing between them. Jake could hardly breathe as the lead coyote took a tentative step closer to the bucket, sniffing the air. The moment stretched long, filled with potential. Would they trust him? One by one, they approached, drawn by the scent of food. Jake felt a strange sense of relief that began to wash over him. The tensions that bound them seemed to unravel as they filled their bellies from the bucket. But as they feasted, Jake sensed something deeper and unspoken bonds slowly forming, understanding emerging amidst the chaos of survival. He watched as the young coyote took a step forward, finally edging toward the food. This moment felt like a crossroads. They weren't just wild animals anymore. They were creatures trying to navigate their existence just like he was. The night couldn't hold its breath forever. As the coyotes finished eating, the pack lingered, staring at him, and Jake's heart raced with what he knew was coming next. Would they view him as a threat again, or had he managed to construct a fragile peace? Then, breaking the charged stillness, a sudden rustle sounded from the tree line behind the pack. Jake's breath caught in his throat. Another group of coyotes emerging from the darkness like phantoms, bigger, bolder, and decidedly more aggressive. They eyed both Jake and the feeding pack with predatory curiosity. Tension surged anew, crackling in the air as growls reverberated through the night. The original pack stood protectively in front of Jake, sensing the danger just as he did, muscles tense and poised to defend. He shouted, clenching the rifle tighter. This was no longer just about protecting his chickens. It was about survival for all of them. The two packs faced off, tension rising like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. He could feel the primal urge of the wild swirling around him, the instincts of both predator and prey. A moment of clarity pierced through the fear. Jake realized he wasn't here simply to fight. He was a part of this struggle, facing a new kind of battle that required a deeper strength. With the rival pack advancing, Jake felt a surge of defiance. He roared, saying it more to himself than to the coyotes. Just then, the younger coyote from the original pack darted forward, nudging against his leg, a touch of warmth amidst the rising tension. As fear and primal instincts clashed, Jake took a chance. Together. In the heart of the standoff, the original pack stood resolute beside him, their growls harmonizing with his voice, adding strength to his resolve. The two packs gazed at each other, a standoff at the cusp of violence with tensions at an all-time high. Jake urged, looking into the eyes of the original pack. He felt a surge of energy, a strange partnership between man and beast stirring within him. But he couldn't predict what would come next. Would the rivals be intimidated? Or would this face-off lead to a much more dangerous confrontation? Just as the original pack readied themselves, the rival pack surged forward, teeth bared, ready for the hunt. In that heartbeat, everything seemed to hang in the balance. The night held its breath, the air thick with anticipation. Jake knew this was a moment that would change everything. His fight for survival was only just beginning. Would it end in turmoil or in an unexpected awakening of unity? The answer was still cloaked in shadow, waiting to unfold in a world where the lines between predator and protector blurred, caught in a dance of survival under the moonlit sky.